And we want to go now to our all-star panel, as we say. They've actually been on the Barton Gellman, who is with us. He is the one who broke this story in the Washington Post about this so-called snooping by the NSA. He has written about it extensively, including in today's paper. Rick Stengel, managing editor of Time magazine, has a fascinating cover story on the leaks this week. He is also just back from Iran. We sure want to talk to him about that. And on the other side, two columnists who've had no shortage of material to analyze and write about. Our friend Peggy Noonan, who writes for the Wall Street Journal, and our friend David Korn, who writes for Mother Jones. Bart, you're the reporter of the hour here. If I'm sitting there reading this, as well, just as me, what should I take away from these revelations that you have brought out this week? What's important here?
There are two really big questions here, and one is about secrecy, and one is about the extent to which the government can look in on our lives as well as everybody else's. And what we've seen here is that we're living behind a one-way mirror, in which there is a very powerful surveillance apparatus that is capable of finding out pretty much anything about us. And they tell us, don't worry, we're protecting your privacy. And there are other people here also behind the one-way mirror who are watching us, but we don't get to participate in what the rules should be. And when Congress authorized this, Congress passed a fairly opaque law. The key parts here are about a couple of paragraphs, which is, I'd say, equivalent to clicking yes on the terms of service when you sign up for Google. You don't know what they're going to do with the information. You don't know what they're collecting in any kind of detail. And then there's a secret interpretation by the executive branch, highly classified. This is what we think this lets us do. And then a secret court, which hears only from the government, issues a secret opinion. Yes, you may do that. And then the whole program itself is secret. So it's a question of how much we want to trust our government. And we were founded on the idea that you don't want to entrust the government with too much centralized power.
Well, has the government done anything illegal, as it were?
I have no reason to think that anybody has violated this sequence of secret laws. What we haven't had a chance to do is decide as a society where we want to draw the boundaries and what the laws should be, because we don't even know what they are.
Peggy?
I think it's all very concerning. I think we are 12 years into this surveillance state apparatus, if you will. It started up after 9/11. There was a great clamor for everybody, do better at intelligence, make us safer. It was all understandable, but at the same time in the past 12 years, the ability of technology to get bulk data, metadata, big data, it's so big it has a million different names and nicknames. Look, I think this is a perfect time to stop and look at what we are erecting here, what good it can do, but also what bad it can do. It's a very delicate thing when you have a big state that can make people, citizens, feel that they are, just assume that they are potentially going to be abused because of the number of things the government knows about them. So in a way, there's something very good about the moment we're in, which is that we're stopping and looking.
David?
This is an issue where there are a lot of nuances that get lost in the demagoguery or excessive rhetoric that goes on in sort of people worrying or people saying everything is fine. To me, Barton and I were talking about this earlier, the whole premise here is that if our government is allowed to do anything secretive, whether it's snooping or doing covert wars or anything else that we've done over the past few decades, that can only be done if representatives of the people have really good oversight. And that means the people we elect to Congress, the oversight committees, the intelligence committees, but others as well. But yet, every time one of these stories breaks, Bart breaks a story, you have members on the Hill saying, I didn't really know about this, or I didn't know as much about it as I should have. So either the government's not, or the executive branch is not telling them what they should, or they're not paying enough attention. And so when we have members come out and say, well, I want to know how many terrorist investigations this has stopped to know whether it's worthwhile or not, that's something they should know already. And the fact that they don't is is one of the major problems here. If you had Democrats and Republicans come out and say, listen, I disagree with this person, everything else, but I can vouch for you that we have been robust and we have vetted this, and this is why we're not concerned, that'd be great. And if we could get some of those secret protocols out there in the public, and there have been groups that have been suing to get them out, and we could see how these programs truly run, that would go a long way to letting, I think, people be reassured.
Can I just say a word about oversight here? Because I think it's important to get this. Aside from the members of the intelligence committees, there is something near zero members of Congress who have a member of their staff who is cleared to know anything about this. And yeah, there's a locked room on Capitol Hill where any member can go in and spend a week sitting in there reading through unbelievably complicated and voluminous sort of reports about how they're doing what they're doing, and the number of members who do that is zero.
Yes.
Well, let me just bring Rick in here, because I want to ask you about this. I mean, what the government would say in response to the argument that you all are making is, look, we can't tell you, we can't give you the justification of why we're doing things a certain way, because if we do, we'll give away something that we don't want the people that are working against us to know about. I mean, I said this in the interview when McDonough, Ronald Reagan said trust but verify. I think we're being asked to trust, but they can't give us the things we need to know to verify that. But is that important, and how do we resolve that?
You know, Bob, as you said, there's a kind of catch-22 quality to this. The government says we can't tell you this, and the courts say we can't let you know about this, so therefore you have to kind of go with us. But I would go back to Bart's point about the point of service contract, right? What we really need as a nation is a point of service contract for what the government relationship is to all of our privacy. What are we willing to sacrifice in terms of our own privacy to guarantee or have the kind of security that we want? And this discussion is the most robust discussion. That's where the overlap between what Bart's reporting is and what Ed Snowden says as well, is that people need to know where to draw the line. And I think, even to go back to what Peggy was saying, the problem with this all now is that technology is eclipsing the way the courts can process this, the way the Congress can process this, and what is private now and what is not private. It's different than it used to be.
But we have surrendered that already in many cases, just as Bart says. I mean,
well, people
put on Facebook now what my generation wouldn't have discussed in mixed company.
The whole notion of privacy.
So is it wrong for a government or an employer or anybody else to look at? It's just like me going out on the street and saying something. That's pretty much
the whole notion of
And the thing is, in our cover story this week, we have a poll. We asked Americans, how do people feel about this? And one of the reactions was about 55% of people said, we kind of thought this was going on already. There's a little bit of the, Inspector Renault qualities. Is there gambling going on in Casablanca? I'm shocked by that. That is the reaction of the American public. They assumed this was going on.
Well, the notion of privacy is shifting too. It's partly generational. People who are growing up living on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and everything else, I think have less a presumption of privacy because they're giving it up voluntarily. And at the same time, we don't get into this conversation much, but corporations are already doing, to a large degree, what people are fearing the government is doing.
Let Bart make his point.
There's something to be said for all this and changing social norms about privacy, but the real issue is not whether we assume that the government is doing something, and not whether people just generally assume that Facebook is doing something. It's not what you give to Facebook, it's what Facebook is taking from you without your knowledge. No matter how many times I, as a fairly informed person on this, read the terms of service, I don't know what's happening, what data is being extracted from me. And the president says he wants a real debate here. And he says, but don't worry, your privacy is being protected. We're not listening, we're just collecting your metadata. Well, if you gave me a choice, because it takes a long time to actually listen to your phone conversations. So let's suppose they're willing to dedicate, in an extreme case, 3 weeks of government time to listen to everything I say and everything I write for those 3 weeks. I would much rather let them do that than let me have my metadata, which can tell who my confidential sources are, where I go, when I go there.
By just tracing the phone numbers.
Yeah, all you need to, I mean, you can draw this graph of sort of my whole movement through space and time, who I'm talking to, whether I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous or which church I go to or whatever.
A few points. One is, in terms of the bulk data. There was an NSA whistleblower a while back, William Binney. He said, you know, we've got so much data now, we can't even analyze it. A, it's unanalyzable. B, oversight is a problem. Excuse me, we have a Congress that is only working 3 days a week when it is in session. Yes. They're barely there. You know all the things they're going to. They are not taking 3 hours as a rule to sit down and study what the government is doing in terms of surveillance. As a matter of fact, the other day, the government, under pressure with the breaking Snowden story, went to senators and said, please come in, we'll have a little top secret meeting with you. 47 of them showed up. Only 47 of them. So I sort of think the FISA courts can't deal with the sheer level of material. They have to trust people. Congress, their oversight capability is not so great. Surveillance takes on its own momentum. It will go forward and forward and forward if somebody doesn't stop it. And I don't think we have something now that says stop beyond a debate that I hope makes everybody uncomfortable and question everything.
All right.
Yeah, by the way, I understand why they want this material. Frankly, as a reporter, I'd like to have this too. I mean, I think the more omniscient you can be, the better you can do your job if your job is to find out what other countries are doing and what plots are coming against you. And it's I don't have any doubt about their motivations, but normally what you want to do is you want to draw boundaries between that and other important things.
Let's take a quick break here, and then we'll be back with more. We're back with our panel. We talk about how our whole idea of privacy has changed. Another thing that has changed since 9/11, we had 2 airplanes that knocked over 2 tall buildings in this country, and all of this went into effect to try to see that didn't happen again. Rick, do you think that our national security has been damaged by these revelations?
You know, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that Snowden himself said was, I tried not to do what Bradley Manning did and release any information that would harm individuals. And again, it goes back to your point. We don't know what has been gathered, so we don't really know what the harm has been. I do think that I come back to this idea that we have to make a judgment about what the value is of what's going on. And we as Americans, using the thing that has worked for us for over 200 years, informed consent, that we need more information to give our consent about what is going on here, and we just haven't had that yet.
Let me just make this point to Bart. The Washington Post and you, I think is your credit, you didn't put in the paper everything that you found out here. You went through a great deal of it and decided some of it should not be put out. How did you make those decisions?
Well, first of all, if you were to look at any big pile of secrets, I'll give you an example that's not in here, but suppose you found out that suppose the document had this unbelievable recipe for a super lethal bomb that anybody can make in their kitchen, right? Not very many people would say that's a good idea to put that out there. There are things in the documents which, if you put them out, would enable sort of foreign governments that are hostile to the United States or foreign terrorists to avoid detection by the United States. And I don't think the Washington Post or I want to let them do that.
We may come back to this, but Rick just got off an airplane. He's just come back from Iran, and I want to talk to him a little bit about that. So they've elected, quote, moderate. The last time we did that was during Iran-Contra when we talked about finding a moderate Iranian, remember? What's the significance of what happened here?
Well, he's only moderate by comparison with the others. I mean, let's stipulate the first thing, that it's a theocracy, right? It's an autocratic society, that the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, runs everything, basically, so he allowed this to happen. But within the context of all of that, there is some cause for optimism, that basically this vindicates the Green Revolution that happened in 2009, where young people came out in favor of these moderates, and then Ahmadinejad was reelected by a disturbingly large majority. This guy, again, by comparison to the others, seems more liberal, but it does reignite that kind of the hopes of young people in Iran. He's much, much more moderate on social policy. He's not going to, put women in prison for showing 2 inches of hair over their hijab. So all of that, I think, is potentially good.
Peggy, the administration now says we're going to send military aid of some sort. You just heard Mike Rogers say he's not sure the Congress will go along with this at this point. Is it too little too late, or is it a good idea in the first place?
I don't know. Oh, one thing I wanted to say quickly about the news this week, Iran is electing a moderate, and Iran is a theocracy. A democracy called Turkey is exploding in the streets over issues touching on theocratic values and theocratic thinking. So it's a funny thing that's going on. I have a feeling Turkey is certainly as big a story as Iran, maybe bigger. Syria, I think the president very obviously must make clear what is the American national interest in what he is doing in Syria. If it is arming certain rebels, which groups, what is our overall purpose? I think you cannot leave an argument to the country to a very talented young staffer who's the Ben Rhodes, who told everybody that the Syria policy is changing. President has to get clear here. He's got to do it. There is, I must tell you, in this time of crises and scandals, a sense of the president not being there sufficiently, talking about all these things, including Syria.
You know, I think the interesting thing about Syria particularly is it's quite clear there are no good options. No one likes any of the options. And I think the president felt like he had to make maybe even a move of show rather than one of true strategic value on sending some military weapons, though not the ones that the rebels are calling for, while at the same time the administration and people in Congress as well have not been able to make clear who the rebels are and why we should be supporting them, good rebels versus bad rebels. And in fact, if you read the coverage in the last couple of days, you see people in the administration and other supporters of this idea saying we really don't want the rebels to have an all-out victory, because then, you know, the institutions of Syria may fall into complete chaos and we could have a tremendous mess there. So when you get into the situation of giving a certain amount but not the right amount to some force that you're not sure about in order to prevent, you know, a victory of either side, it's really, really messy, which is why you see people like Chairman Rogers and Eric Cantor come out this week and sound like they're being critical of the president without really being able to say what they'd like to do differently, because nobody except John McCain wants to own a real war in Syria.
Do you see any kind of a connection between this business on the NSA story and, as Chairman Rogers was saying, the questions of credibility for the administration on such things as Benghazi and the IRS scandal?
Well, only in the most generic way, which is that whenever the government asks us to trust, you want to see what they're talking about. On the Syria thing, I guess I'd say that when you want to influence events and you can't control events, you get a lot of dilemmas. So remember that we're at this place right now because the president said, "Don't you dare use chemical weapons," and you want to deter that, say bad things will happen if you do. And then Assad does use the chemical weapons, and you still don't have any good options.
All right. We have to stop. The clock just struck 12 or whatever it struck. We'll be back in a moment. Thank you all very much.